So find a place to stand that is comfortable. And then see, what does standing feel like this morning? Is it difficult to feel? Are you much more interested in something that you're thinking about or remembering or practicing in your mind? And how is it to bring your attention to simply the sensations that you notice as you're standing? So you could ask yourself how comfortable you feel. And then you can get a little bit technical and you can start to feel the way the floor is touching each of your feet and notice if there's a difference in the pressure, if you get more of a gecko paw pressure on one foot than the other, or maybe you have more like little blocks, little hooves. See what kind of character your feet are in the way that they contact the floor. And how balanced do you feel? And then you can open your eyes and have a little wander around the space, walk around a little bit, and pay attention to what walking feels like this morning. And if you're new to this kind of work, then it hopefully is interesting to just consider what is walking like. And that's the game that we're playing. The Feldenkrais Method is starting to become aware of things we weren't aware of before. I like to think of it as giving your brain food so it can function better. All right, now as you're walking around, pay specific attention to the way that you feel your trunk, meaning your upper back, your chest, your shoulders, your ribs. And does that area feel different from your hips and your low back, or is that kind of all the same area? How do you define those parts of you in your sensing? And pay attention to if there's any movement in either of your shoulders, if either of your arms swings, and if they do, does one swing differently than the other? And if there's any movement in your chest. And then just overall, how comfortable are you walking? How clearly can you connect through the bones of your legs to your feet, and then from the floor through your feet, up your legs, to your hips, back up to your trunk and your head. Okay, and then leave it and come to your place and lay down on your back. So the very simple and really quite incredible tool that we use in Awareness Through Movement lessons to improve the way that we feel ourselves and the way we sense ourselves is the floor. Because especially if you come back to a practice like this over and over again, you can start to recognize the way that you perceive yourself as it's represented against the floor. So I recently heard a teacher use the analogy of a fingerprint. I think I said that to somebody yesterday, which I thought was really cool. This idea that as you're laying there on the floor, the parts of you that you can sense making contact, it's as though your whole self was like a giant fingerprint. And so it's important to get a sense of how many parts do you feel? Is there a lot of difference between where you feel yourself very deeply and completely and heavy touching the floor, and then there's many parts that you can feel that touch the floor but less? And then you can play with this gradation of sensation. So how subtle can it be? How much can you feel? This is the heaviest contact, and this is lighter, and then this is lighter, and then this is lighter. And at some point, there's some parts of you, maybe the back of your knees or certainly the back of your neck, doesn't touch the floor at all. So play with that for a few moments on your own, just considering the gradations of sensation that you feel. And then bring your attention to your breathing and listen for what effect your breathing might have on the gradations of sensation that you have touching the floor. Does the pressure of yourself against the floor change at all when you're paying attention to your breathing? And then shift your attention to the back of your shoulders. And see if you can compare the size and the shape of each of your shoulders. And then compare that to your hips, the back of your pelvis. And then feel what happens between those two areas. The slope of your spine from the top of your shoulders down to your tailbone. And see if you can get clearer and clearer the kind of space behind your low back. When does the space come back down at your upper back? When does it come back down at your back of your pelvis? And also start to include your neck and the space behind your neck. And then compare the way that your right and your left leg lay on the floor. If there's a difference in your right and your left arm, hand, maybe there's a bigger space behind one wrist or a different kind of feeling, contraction in one of your hands. And really, as far as I'm concerned, this is the bookends. This is the crucial ingredient in this practice is coming back to this felt sense awareness and the value of it as a tool also to help out when our minds get scattered and spun out, we get stressed. Bend your right knee and stand your right foot. And start to do a movement of pressing into your right foot. And as you do this, especially for you guys that are practicing a lot, right? Be careful of getting into this automatic mind state. Because not only is what we're doing different, but every time you come to a movement, it has to be new. That's where your learning continues, right? As soon as you're like, oh yeah, I know how to do this, that's it. There's no more learning, right? So as you press into your foot, feel for the way that your right hip will lift a little bit away from the floor. And take your time really trying to coordinate the feeling of pressing into the foot, feeling how your foot connects to your leg, and your leg is like a lever that lifts your right hip, and then bring it back down. You can explore where you can reduce the effort. And this is the integral part of our practice, is recognizing where we're using unnecessary strain. So keep looking for the way that you can do this movement that's smooth. And if it gets a little jerky, or if you feel, oh, it's funny, I have this little muscle contraction, just check and see, is it possible you could do the movement in a different way that could be more comfortable, more easy. How far up your spine do you feel a response? Now notice as you're pressing into your foot, if your knee is going a little bit to the left. Now compare how it is if you don't let your knee go to the side. Okay, and then lengthen out your legs and take a little rest. Bend your left knee and stand your left foot. Stand your left foot a little bit out to the left and a little bit toward your left hip or the left side of your bum. So not too far out, just not directly under your knee. And then continue in this situation, press into your left foot and let your left hip lift and see what's different in the way that this movement travels through your spine. Spine's a little longer. This guy looks and do the same comparison that you did on the other side. See what actually feels different if as you're pushing your foot, you let your knee go to the right or you don't. And then leave it and lengthen out your legs. And bring your attention to your contact with the floor, your reference point, and notice if there's any change in that imprint that you make with the floor. And then stand your right foot again and have it just a little bit out to the right. And lengthen your right arm along the floor, somewhere alongside your head. Doesn't matter the angle, just that your hand is touching the floor. Keep pressing into your right foot gently and keep listening how that movement travels up your spine. And start to listen to the effect the movement has on your right shoulder. So the question is, can you listen to this movement in this moment and not anticipate or create or make it be something else? As you're pressing into your foot and you're lifting the right side of your pelvis, listen if you can simultaneously lengthen your right arm and see if you can start to set up a relationship there. And if you're not sure, I don't feel a connection between those things. Yeah, maybe at first you just do it on purpose and you see what turns up. But you see if you can start to make a connection between lifting your right hip a little bit, so the right side of you is a little bit lifted. And see, does that mean that your right shoulder lifts, or does it mean that your right shoulder goes down? And depending on the position of your right shoulder, how could you reach your right arm? And the question is if you can start to feel that those aren't two arbitrary movements, that there's actually a connection there. Leave it for a moment. You can lengthen out your legs, bring your arm down if you like. And then try it with the left side. Stand your left foot and have your left foot close to your bum, but a little to the left. And lengthen your left arm up by your head, or whatever place you can have your arm that doesn't strain your shoulder. And gradually start to press into your left foot. And listen, first don't force it, just listen for a connection to your left shoulder. And see if you actually do less, if you push less, if you expect less, but you stay open and curious to there being several ways to do this, you might surprise yourself. Okay, and then leave it, pause for a moment. Now this time, stand your right foot, keep your left leg long. Now this time, continue the movement of pressing into your foot and lifting your hip, and listen to what effect that movement could have on your head. And then if it's not happening already, or even if it is happening already, deliberately, as you push into your foot and you lift your hip, as you feel that movement going up your spine, at the top of that movement, tilt your head back just a little bit so that your chin shifts a teeny bit toward the ceiling. And again, it's not arbitrary, right? See if you can start to make a connection, even if you create it. Make a connection for when your pelvis lifts, there's a feeling in your spine, and then your head tilts back a little bit. And then bring your arm back up, your right arm back up alongside your head. And continue doing that same thing. Press into your foot, lift your hip, and let your head tilt back a little bit. And see if you can start to add in the first thing, which was lengthening your arm. Do it a few times, but let your chin come down toward your chest. And then go back to doing it the first way. Take a little pause. And in fact, bring everything down for a minute. Check on the way that you feel the floor touching you. And then stand your right foot the same way again. And this time, keep your right arm down by your side. And instead of lengthening your right arm up, now lengthen your right arm down. And you want to start to lengthen your right arm along the floor, down. At the same moment that you press into your foot, you lift your hip. And again, err on the side of doing less, right? The curious game, it's just words until it starts to make sense. The curious game is, how do I evoke a movement from the absence of strain? Can the absence of something actually create something? What does your head do? And keep your knee pointing to the ceiling. Don't let your knee roll to the left or the right. So that your right hip lifts in some kind of way. It might lift toward the ceiling. It might feel like it lifts toward your head as you lengthen your right arm. And if it's jerky, stop before it's jerky. It could be such a small movement, I can't even see you doing it. It doesn't matter, right? The question is learning how to move without strain. Now see how it is if you can continue lengthening your right arm as you lift your right hip, but also lengthen the back of your neck so that your chin comes a little bit toward your chest. Okay, and then pause for a moment. You can keep your foot here. Keep your foot standing and instead bring your right arm back up alongside your head. And again, make sure that your right foot is standing firmly so you get a good support from the floor. Your right foot is as close to your bum as it can be without any kind of strain. And it's not right under your knee, it's a bit out to the right. And then go back to the previous movement. Press in your foot, lift your right hip, and lengthen your right arm. And see if you can let your head tilt back so the back of your neck gets a little bit shorter. this lesson is doing, and why I said it's an advanced lesson, is it's teaching you to use yourself in a way that a lot of us forget how to use ourselves. It teaches you how to start to integrate your upper back, spine, your upper ribs, and your breastbone in a way that most of us end up negating, especially these days, the way that we're focusing our eyes on our devices. So as you're playing with these movements, consider if there's a way that you're actually stiffening and resisting the possibility of the movement. And then take a little rest. And then stand your right foot close to your bum, a little out to the right. Lengthen your right arm alongside your head, or at whatever angle is the most comfortable for your arm and your wrist, your hand. Now I'm going to ask you to do something kind of funny. As you press into your foot and you lift your hip a little bit from the floor, start to roll your face a little in the direction of your right arm. And see if you can protrude your belly a little bit in the moment that you reach your arm and you turn your head a bit toward your arm. And see if you can feel the shape of your spine when you do this movement. A few times continue, but roll your head away from your arm. And then pause for a moment. You can bring everything down, or you can leave it like this. And this time, stand your right foot and lengthen your right arm alongside your head. A couple times, just do the movement of pressing into your foot and listening if there's any change in the way that you feel that movement going up your spine. If there's any more of a response that you can feel in your head. And then pause for a moment, and this time, as you press into your foot and you lift your hip and you lengthen your right arm a little bit, see if you can start to rotate your face to the left and slide the back of your head in the direction of your right arm. So there's a rotation, your head rolls to the left a little bit, and the back of your head slides a bit toward your arm. And again, find the way that's not jerky. Find the way that you can do it without moving your knee to the left and the right. And see if you can start to make a connection between the movement of your pelvis, which is the bottom of your spine, and the movement of your head, which is the top of your spine. What parts of your spine can you feel moving? Good. Okay, leave it, bring everything down. Feel your contact with the floor. And compare the left and the right side of your pelvis and the size and the shape of each of your shoulders and the way you feel each of your legs and each of your arms. So now stand your left foot. And remember that everything could be completely different on this side, so don't have any expectations or need for anything particular. And lengthen your left arm alongside your head. Yeah, exactly. It's a precarious game with the padding under your head, because if it's too high, it'll actually make it less possible to move your head. However, if you need support under your neck, it's also important your neck is comfortable. So it's that kind of three bears effect of what's just right. And make sure that your arm is not suspended in space. Make sure your arm is resting on a block or a cushion or the floor on something, yeah? Now, press into your foot and listen for the response in your head. See if there's a movement in your chin. You could get savvy and try a few different little placements of your foot and notice if there's a difference in that transmission of force up to your head. And then whether it's happening naturally or not yet, start to gradually connect the feeling of tilting your head back, shortening the back of your neck with the pressing of your foot and lifting your hip. What changes if you do that? Is there a change in the weight of your upper back or your shoulders? What's different if you lengthen the back of your neck as you do it? And then just a few times go back to lifting your chin as you do it and also lengthen your left arm. So the back of your neck gets a little shorter, your chin lifts, maybe it's 0.5 millimeter toward the ceiling. And then bring your left arm down by your side. And a few times see what's different if you press into your left foot as you lengthen your left arm down. And again, you're not doing anything deliberately yet. You're just seeing if you do it without strain, what might happen spontaneously. So don't yet intentionally do anything with your head. Just feel the connection between sliding your shoulder along the floor, sliding your arm along the floor as you lift that hip. And then gradually add in lengthening the back of your neck and dropping your chin a little bit towards your chest, just a little bit. Is it possible to lengthen your arm and tilt your head back? Bring your arm back up alongside your head. And without doing anything with your arm or your head, a few times press into your foot and just reinvestigate that transmission of force that goes up your spine. And to what's the quietest whisper of response you can feel in your arm or in your head? And then see how it is to roll your head in the direction of your left arm as you lift your hip. What's it asking of your spine? And try rolling your head away from your arm. And then a couple times see how it would be to slide the back of your skull toward your lengthened left arm. Maybe it's a millimeter, half a millimeter. Maybe it's just an imagination, imagining what that would be like. The back of your skull, like there's an eye on the back of your head, and you want to look at your arm with that eye on the back of your head. So slide the back of your head back in the direction of your arm. Maybe it's more like it's a mouth and it wants to kiss your arm. There's a mouth on the back of your head and it wants to kiss your arm. Oh, that one worked, eh? Just needed a kissing head. Who knew? Okay. Leave it. Take a rest. Feel your contact with the floor again. See what the floor can tell you about how you're breathing. Just keep your right leg long, but lengthen it along the floor and then shorten it. Don't bend or unbend it. Keep it long, but see what it's like. What do you have to do with your hip and your low back if you want to grow your right leg a millimeter longer and then shorten it a millimeter shorter? What effect does that movement of your leg have on your spine? What about the other leg? Try it with the other leg. See how it is to lengthen and shorten the left leg. Could you listen for a feeling in your chest and your upper back as you lengthen and shorten your left leg? And then bend both of your knees and stand both of your feet. And see that your feet are supporting the weight of your legs well. And gradually start to lift your pelvis up into the air, only as much as you can comfortably. And see if you can lean on one vertebra at a time going up your back without pushing or straining, just what's super easy. And then see if you can come back down again, leaning on one vertebra, then the next, then the next. And as you're investigating this movement, listen to the effect it has on your head. And see if as you lift the bottom of your spine, which is your tailbone, your pelvis, if you can lengthen the top of your spine, lengthen the back of your neck as you lift your pelvis away from the floor. Can you make the back of your neck longer, back of your skull longer? And then as you gradually bring your spine and your hips back down, can your head come back to neutral? Err on the side of pleasure. And then lengthen yourself out and take a little rest. Bend both your knees and stand both your feet. Put your palms facing down. have your elbows a little wider away from you than your hands. With the absence of strain, just see what's possible. What's the most gentle, gradual way that you could push a bit into your elbows and your hands and ever so slightly get a sense of lifting your shoulders and then bring them back down. If you have a huge box and you're holding it up over your head and a fly comes and sits on the box, you have no idea, right? If you're holding a feather and the fly comes and sits on the feather, then you can feel the fly. So this painstaking process is about getting better at feeling the fly. Yeah, exactly. So if you're not already, as you're lifting your shoulders a millimeter, tilt your head back a little bit, so that there's a bit more of a space for a little ant to crawl underneath the base of your neck and the top of your shoulders. How do you change the shape of your thorax, the shape of your ribs and your upper back when you lift your shoulders and you tilt your head back? What changes overall in the shape? Good. Leave that, lengthen out your left leg and adjust your right foot so that it's a little bit out to the right. Okay, now don't panic. Lift your right arm up to the ceiling and flex your wrist as though you wanted to give a high five to the ceiling, and then bend your elbow and see if you can start to bring your hand, the palm of your hand, back and down toward the floor next to your head. And I have blocks and cushions and blankets nearby, as though you were going to do a wheel pose in yoga. You have the palm of your hand on the floor somewhere, let's say between your ear and your shoulder. You put it on this guy. Now we don't want to strain your shoulder at all, or we're not going to get anywhere with this thing. So hang on a second. I'm going to find a variation that's going to be awesome for your shoulders. Give a high five to the ceiling. Okay, actually, you know what's better? Make a gentle fist, like a hook. Just gentle. Yeah. Okay, and then we're gonna do it like this. How's this? Is that manageable? Fun in the shoulder? Okay. Okay, so your hand is standing, or you've made a gentle fist like a hoof. If your hand doesn't comfortably come to the floor, then bring the floor to your hand. You want some floor under your hand? So stand your palm somewhere next to your ear and shoulder. See how it is to push into your foot and lift your right hip. And come back down. And as you continue playing with this movement, start to listen to the effect lifting your hip has on your right shoulder. And if you don't control the movement or need it to be a certain way, to look a certain way, you might spontaneously start to use your chest, your head, your shoulders. Okay, bring your hip down. Take your left hand and put it on your right elbow. See if you can move your right elbow a millimeter to the right and then back and a millimeter to the left. It's up to you to take care of yourself here. Don't be calling me later and say, oh my God, I totally screwed up my shoulder in that class, right? If you feel a little bit of pain, don't do it. That's not the point, right? There's no advantage in doing this movement. It's just for if it's accessible. Imagining it is an awesome way to approach this movement. Now the question as you continue, whether you're imagining it or you're doing it, is what's possible with your shoulder blade? Can your shoulder blade move? to accommodate the movement of your elbow? What about up and down in the direction of your head and the direction of your feet? Could you move your elbow a millimeter toward your head and a millimeter toward your feet? Make sure you're breathing in and out. And what is this asking of your shoulder blade? Does your shoulder blade move? Because if you're insisting that your humerus, your upper arm bone moves, but your shoulder's saying no fucking way, well, you're going to have a bit of an impasse here, right? So maybe part of how you could talk to your shoulder blade is if you talk to your neck and you say, hey, neck, are you stopping me from moving? And you say, oh, geez, that's funny. I was kind of doing this funny thing with my neck. Or, oh, I was kind of tightening in my chest. Or I was kind of pulling myself away from the floor, right? These are the things to check for. Some of you might be able to do some kind of little circular movement of your elbow. It doesn't matter if it's a circle, if it's up and down. The question is, you're trying to find out, what is the mobility of my shoulder here? Not where can I wrench it to, but how can I move it in a way that's easy for me? Okay, and then bring your arms, both your arms and your legs down. Roll your head a little bit. Make sure you didn't secretly accidentally do anything weird to your neck. Okay, and then bend your left knee, stand your left foot. A couple times, just do the pressing of your left foot and listen how that movement is traveling up to your head. Bring your left arm up toward the ceiling, and then give high five to the ceiling. And then bend your elbow forward so that you're giving high five to someone standing behind you. And then put the bottom of your hand down on the floor. So same thing. First, see a few times how it is to press into your left foot and lift your left hip and feel what happens to your left shoulder. And then leave that, put your right hand on your left elbow. And then again, the name of the game is not trying to accomplish something, it's about investigating. What is my range of motion? How does my arm bone move in my shoulder joint? And see, first, can I bring my elbow a millimeter left and a millimeter right? Bring your elbow a little bit up towards your head and a little bit down towards your knee. A millimeter up towards your head, a millimeter towards your knee. Yeah, exactly, literally. And make sure that you're not straining your wrist or your hand. Keep your hand and your wrist as soft as you can. Pause a moment, bring your leg down. Now there's a few more variations. Some of these variations not everybody's going to do, right? Doesn't matter. What's important is that you do what you can do so you can learn. So stand your right foot again. Close to your bum, but a little bit to the right. And find your variation of standing your hand next to your face, or let's say next to your shoulder blade, whatever is accessible for you. That's okay then. Now, let me say this first and see if you can imagine it or visualize it. This time, when you press into your foot, you'll lift your right hip, and then just a little bit, you're going to press into your right hand and lift your right shoulder. And let your head roll however it wants to, and then come back. So you lift your right hip and you lift your right shoulder. And you find out where you might be interfering. If you can soften your weight on the left side, if you can soften your chest bone, soften your breathing. And see if you can find kind of the moment that pressing into your hand helps you lift your foot. Lift your hip, sorry, pressing into your foot and lifting your hip. So as you're pressing your foot, your hip's lifting, at what moment can you help that movement by pressing into your hand? So again, it starts to be a coordinated, a whole thing, right? Now pause a moment, keep your arms in this situation, your arm and leg in this situation. And again, don't strain, but see a few times what it would be like to first press into your hand and lift your shoulder, and then lift your hip. Your resource is in the not doing. Don't take my word for it. Find out for yourself. And then take a little time and play with it. See which way is easier for you. Are you like, oh, I'm definitely a hip guy. If I lift the hip, then I can lift my shoulder. Maybe you're thinking, oh no, actually I can lift my shoulder a lot easier than I can lift my hip. Just see what you can learn there about how you like to organize yourself. And let your head roll away from your arm. Or maybe your chin lifts a little bit. Okay, and then rest. You take a few moments to feel your breathing in the front, the sides of your chest. One more time, right foot is standing a little bit out to the right, close to your bum. Right hand is standing somewhere between your shoulder and your ear, or it's resting on a padding, whatever your situation is. And again, listen first, let me say the instruction and see if you can visualize it, imagine how it feels, and then you can try it. So this time, and you can choose if you want to lift your hip first, you want to lift your shoulder first. So as you lift, maybe together, so you lift your hip and your shoulder, you're going to start to slide the back of your head in the direction of your upper arm. And then you'll bring your shoulder and your hip down and bring your head back. Where could you reduce the effort? On the left hip, the left leg, the left ribs. And then whatever variation you're doing, push your belly forward as you lift your hip and your shoulder and see what changes. Keep your foot standing. You're not bringing your knee to the left and the right, right? Your knee stays more or less facing to the ceiling. Try it a few times without lifting your hip. How is it to keep your hip on the floor, lift your right shoulder, and slide the back of your head towards your upper right arm? Can you do that without lifting your hip? Check in on your contact with the floor. The size and the shape of each of your shoulders. The weight of your upper back and your ribs and the sides. And the slope of your spine. And then switch sides, stand your left foot. Stand your left hand on the floor between your shoulder and your ear, or rest it on whatever padding situation you've got. And gradually start to investigate how it is to lift your hip and your shoulder simultaneously, as though they're one thing, a millimeter from the floor. Just your left hip. Right hip is heavy, right leg is heavy. Let your head turn a little bit to the right. And then what if, instead of your head turning to the right, what if your head tilts back? Try it a few times that way. So your chin lifts a bit to the ceiling as you lift your shoulder and your head. You don't turn your head to the right at all, you just tilt your head back. Where do you look with your eyes? You can look up, see if the cat's right above your head. Lift your chin a bit toward the ceiling, look up for the cat above you. And protrude your belly. And again, it's not a dance move. It's not about nailing the dance move, right? Feel, what are you doing with your spine? Your spine goes from your tailbone right up to the back of your skull, right? So slow down a lot. And instead of practicing using your spine like you do every day already, see if you can go slow enough that you can figure out, holy shit, I never use this part of my spine, including right now. Or maybe you can use it right now. You don't need to practice what you already know how to do. Exactly. And then play with it yourself. Try a few times to see how would it be if you lifted your shoulder first and then your hip. But you're never lifting your head away from the floor. If anything, your head should get heavier in the floor. Just a millimeter. No effort. Yeah, see how it is. What if you don't lift your hip at all? And see how it is to just lift your left shoulder. Don't press into your foot. Don't lift your hip. Just lift your shoulder. Or add back in the hip so that your brain can say, oh, I see. There's a relationship. I get support of this movement of my shoulder when I integrate my hip. Yeah, and if that feels smooth or comfortable, then start to integrate. How could you start to slide? There's a big mouth on the back of your skull. And with that mouth on the back of your skull, you want to kiss your bicep. Okay, good. Leave it. Bring your arms and legs down. Feel your contact with the floor. Now, if you notice that those last variations took a great deal of concentration and it was very challenging to do without strain or effort, then you might choose to skip the last variation and your system might do well to process and for you to rest. And if you felt like the previous variations, whatever kind of challenge they were, you didn't feel any kind of strain, then you might be interested in doing one last variation. So if you choose to do the last variation, bend both your knees and stand both of your feet. And put both of your hands on the floor between your ear-shoulder area or on the padding. Is there a way that you could be more comfortable in this uncomfortable situation? Is there something in the anticipation that creates some sort of tension? Now just lackadaisically, non-committally investigate what it would be like in this situation to lift your shoulders a millimeter from the floor. Allow things to be smoother. Maybe it's by getting a sense of the width of your ribs in the back. Maybe it's by feeling how heavy your head is and letting the back of your head slide a millimeter toward your shoulders. Your chin lift a millimeter toward the ceiling. So instead of just trying one way over and over again and waiting for it to feel better, get crafty. Start to investigate. Yeah, exactly. What else? It might be like what I said with myself. You might be doing something funny with your groin, your low back, anywhere else that's actually interfering. So keep checking. What else could I do? Back of your head's heavy. Don't lift your head from the floor. Head is on the floor. And see if as you lift your shoulders a millimeter from the floor, you can tilt your head back so that your chin lifts a little bit toward the ceiling. And how do you get support lower down your back when you want to do that? Where do you put the weight? What part of your spine do you lean on in order to lift your shoulders? Are your hands in the best place they could be? Is there a more comfortable place for them? Maybe the angle that they're pointing. And then a couple times, see if you can do the opposite. Let me say it first. See if you can press your shoulders a little bit into the floor and lift your head. So your chin goes to your chest and you lift your head a millimeter from the floor. You drop your chin as though you want to look at your own belly button. All right, leave it. Take a rest. And feel your contact with the floor. And bring your arms down. And bring your attention back to that, the imprint of yourself and all of its unique gradations of contact all along the back side of you. And notice if there's any changes in that imprint. And the arches, if there's any changes in the size or the shape or the feeling of the arches under you. Notice if there's any change in the feeling of your breathing. How it moves, how it feels, the ease you have in breathing, the areas that you are aware of your breathing. And then I'll leave you here.